Very good. Thank you again, Grady. So I want to talk to you about another effort that's going on. This one is a local one. It's called the Co-op. It's a group of churches working together to try to do community development or neighborhood revitalization in 3 Kansas City neighborhoods. And I want to talk to you about the idea of cooperation to collaboration, that it takes more than vision and values and the courage to act. It takes something else in addition to that. Currently, the co-op has about 8 partners involved, but I need to tell you how we got to this place and how we got to this statement here at the bottom of what it's all about. About 8 years ago, we started with a conference downtown with about 100 different people involved called Beyond Talk, and the idea behind that was, could we get urban and suburban churches to come together to talk about how we might partner in ways that could make a difference in our communities differently than what we had been in the past, because I knew there were these underlying tensions between primarily the Anglo community and the African American community in the works that we were doing. I knew that some of the complaints about how we had partnered in the past, about ways in which we had simply imposed in the urban core our agendas and our ideas and various things like that. We came out of that conference of over 100 people, and I forget how many different organizations, with a commitment that we would sit together on a regular basis around a table and begin to discuss what it would look like for us to partner in different kinds of ways. And quite frankly, it took us about 4 years of meeting twice a month at First Watch down at Westport to keep hammering away at ideas of what it might look like to be able to partner together. And we got to a breakthrough after about 3.5 years. We were sitting around a table. We'd begun to develop the kinds of relationships with one another that one of our African-American pastors, Greg Ely, who's still a part of it, looked at us and he risked it all in that moment. He says, you know what? I'm sick and tired of being a positive volunteer experience for rich white folks from the suburbs. Wow. The air sort of left the room with this collective gasp, but nobody left the table. And I so remember the follow-up to that then was Jonathan Bell, who was at the time the director of missions at Church of the Resurrection, said, okay, I'll risk it. And I'm tired of feeling like an ATM machine every time I walk into a room. Now, folks, that's being real. That's getting to the point. That's building relationships that can bear the weight of truth-telling. And we sat in that room together and said, okay, and by that time we were down to only about 8 or 10 people. So out of 100 people, there were only 8 or 10 that stayed at the table long enough to get to that statement right there. And we said, if we're not going to partner together to provide positive volunteer experiences for rich white folks in the suburbs, and we're not going to partner together to keep the lights on for an urban church, then why would we partner together? And over time, we eventually decided that we're going to partner together for the neighborhood. What would it look like for us to partner together to create neighborhoods where people would want to live and not leave? Now it's not about the volunteer experience that's happening from people coming from the suburbs, and it's not about keeping the lights on at the church, but instead it's about changing the quality of life for people that live within walking distance of an urban partnering church. And so in that somewhat historical moment, we had kind of stacked hands on that's why we want to partner together. It's about the neighborhood. It's about what we could do once we got outside the 4 walls of the church in partnering together between primarily resourced communities and under-resourced communities. What happened from there then was that we had to begin wrestling with what we were doing in those communities. And we had to admit, and there's all kinds of great reading out there about this, that much of what the church has been doing in the past has been traditional relief and betterment kinds of things. And like the Blind Side story, those kinds of efforts, the more they succeed, the more they become an exit strategy for young men and women to get out of the neighborhood. So think about that for a moment. The more success we were having in the things that we were traditionally good at, the church, emergency relief and individual betterment, the more we were depleting the community of the potential strengths that they would have in young people growing up. And every pastor, every urban pastor, and every urban person that we worked with in this whole context, the co-op was created between urban and suburban. It was never one group was never not represented at the table. And so everything that got created was done jointly in this process. And they all said the same thing, that if our young people get helped in this neighborhood, the advice they get from everybody is get out of the neighborhood. And the question that we're asking is, how does that create the kind of a neighborhood where you would want to live and not leave? So we began then to wrestle with another concept. What if we were to add community development to what we were traditionally good at? So that it's now no longer just emergency relief and individual betterment, but what if we figured out the kinds of things that happen at true community development level, and the church began to become as good at that as it was at emergency relief and betterment? And so we sat on a quest to figure out what are the things that really add to what we would call that third bucket. Virtually everybody calls everything that they do in a neighborhood community development. And so we're at that stage again where we're wrestling with words. And everybody can use a word any way that they want to, but we stayed there and we stayed at the table long enough to define what do we mean by community development. So that we anyhow in the co-op would agree that this is what we mean by community development, not that. So all of the individual betterment things that were going on in neighborhoods were being called community development. All of the emergency relief were being called community development as well. But as we looked at the research, we saw that there were 4 catalytic areas that had to happen within a geographical footprint if indeed you were going to get people to the point where you could break the cycle of poverty and you would have a place where people would want to live and not leave. And these are the 4 areas. It would include mixed income housing, because when you isolate poverty beyond about 35%, the geographical area that they live in cannot raise above the poverty level because there's not disposable income in that area. And that's not our idea. That's what all of the best research is told. So could the church participate, in addition to relief and betterment, in the kinds of things that would require true blue development at a mixed income level? Also, economic development. How do you create jobs or access to living wage jobs? The third was cradle to career education. Who would want to live in a neighborhood in which the schools would not rightfully educate their kids to the level that they needed to be? And then health and wellness resources. And so when we talk about community development, we're talking about the church being involved in these 4 things in addition to the relief and betterment things that they're doing. We also wrestled then with our starting points. The starting points would be that we would work with an urban church and an urban pastor, because we are churches. The folks that were at the table were churches. We can't mobilize the government side. We can't mobilize other sectors, but we could mobilize the church. And so we were going to start with an urban church and an urban pastor who had a viable church and was community-minded and willing to work collaboratively. We were also going to work from what's known as a strength-based approach or asset-based community development. It's saying that there are strengths already in the neighborhood. How do we work with the community at large? Not for them or around them or instead of them, but how do we do that as part of the process? And then we also decided that because we were churches mobilizing missions, that we would be what we call a tricultural approach. We would work with urban ministry leaders, suburban ministry leaders, and marketplace leaders. And I hope to have a chance to unpack that a little bit with you. But you talk about cultural clashes and when you get those 3 different groups together. But an utter commitment to those 3 things as being part of the core foundation of what we were going to do. And then we decided that we would work in these 3 neighborhoods so that we wouldn't spread ourselves so thin that we weren't able to do anything, because we're trying to figure out what some of the transferable principles would be in each of these areas, and then what some of the differences are in each one of them, so that it's tailored to the community as a whole. We also then worked at establishing a leadership team of individuals from the community. We call it a neighborhood transformation initiative, and we call it a neighborhood transformation initiative leadership team made up of leaders from the community who then are involved in what we call community action groups here. And I'll unpack this with anybody that would like to. There's information out in the foyer as well on this. And then also connecting the community with these 4 big catalytic areas. We committed ourselves to the idea of collective impact, or a type of collaboration that had far more rigor than what most groups are used to being a part of. We talk about this as collaboration moving from an adjective or a verb to a noun. We structured ourselves and created some strategies through which we all agreed to work in mutually reinforcing ways, a collective agenda, a commitment to metrics, and all those kinds of things. I'm brushing through this quickly, but the work that it took to get to these things was really critical in the whole process. And then A few examples of some stuff that we're doing in the neighborhood real quickly. We decided then let's start with the first block approach. How would we begin to make our presence known in the Wendell Phillips, one of our neighborhoods there? And so we began to buy houses on this block that you see right here. We also began to leverage the relationships that we were having with the marketplace people that we were pulling in from our churches to create some programs that could put people into home ownership. This is a duplex that we are currently refurbishing, in which we will be working with the principal from the elementary school up here in the top right-hand corner to not take homeless people, but to take people that just need a hand up, if you will, into home ownership, move them from that house into some of these other houses that we're purchasing and rehabbing. But for us to be able to do that, we had to begin developing some partnerships. One of the most exciting things then is when we began to create the kinds of structure necessary, we found people like Mazuma Credit Union that was willing to come in and partner with us. So we've bought these properties. We're working with a neighborhood group to actually put former felons to work rehabbing these houses and then to put them into home ownership. We got a $75,000 grant to refurbish 2 of these houses, and we found a banking institution, a credit union, that was going to loan us money to sell these houses back to the people that are coming through our Good Neighbor housing program. Let's get what this is now. We raise philanthropic dollars. We put people to work. We get them into home ownership. We go back to the bank. We have a bank work with us to actually get this person into a home ownership, which is an asset, a wealth-generating asset for somebody who's never had that in the community. And we're recapturing $50,000 of the $75,000 grant that we had. That's the kind of stuff that we're talking about being able to do in community development types of stuff. We're just waiting to get a clear title on this house up in the upper right-hand corner, and we will start refurbishing that house and have our first person ready to move into that, hopefully by the first of the year. We've also begun working on a project called Mission House, which allows young people from our churches to live in context within the neighborhood, to work with the co-op strategies that are working in the neighborhood. We've also begun to do some stuff with UMKC, and I'm going to introduce Jim Delisle here in just a minute. In addition to that, we're also working with some key and critical partners like Avenue of Life, who has taken possession of a building just outside of our footprint in the Wendell Phillips neighborhood. And they ended up with a 40,000, is that about right? About 40,000 square foot building in which they're doing mattress recycling. And they've given us this little building down here in the right-hand corner that you see circled right there as one of our first economic development projects, in which we're going to be working with UMKC and our partnering churches to design something to go into that will be job generating, job training, or something like that. The idea has been an automotive shop or something like that. Now, most people want to hear all about the kinds of things that are going on in these last 2 slides, and if I had more time, I'd give you some of that. The real point that I want you to see is the work that it took us in the first 10 slides was about 4 to 5 years of building the kinds of things that would be necessary for us to be able to enter into some other kinds of partnerships. One of those was our commitment to research, data, feasibility, and those kinds of things. The church historically has been incredibly good in what we would call the hand and the heart. We show up to do things, and we've got a heart to stay long after others go away, but we don't always think through the things that we're doing. And so we were praying and looking and working and hoping that we might be able to enter into some kind of a partnership with a key educational institution in the area, and various things happened, and we ended up running into a couple of gentlemen from UMKC, began to spend some time with Tony Lapino and Jim Delisle, and both of those gentlemen who are up at UMKC saw some value in what the co-op was doing, this group of churches, faith-based folks trying to do community development, and over the course of about a year or so, they came into a working partnership with UMKC. So I've asked Jim Delisle to come up. He's from the University of Missouri, Kansas City. I would love for you to give him a warm welcome. Come on, Jim. And I've asked Jim to give you just a few minutes in this presentation of the things that he's doing and why they're a part of this. Jim, thank you.
Thank you, Tom. This morning, if we recall, Tom was talking about marketplace people and bringing their A game. And I think what we bring to the table is not only the marketplace people, but the academy. So maybe this is the M&A game. But the reality is it's not a game, it's life, and it has sustainable consequences. And that's what we're trying to do here. So let me explain how we walk through the process. The connections that Tom talked about, the co-op connecting with Pastor Ely in Wendell Phillips, Paseo Baptist, then connecting with Hickman Mills. So it's all about connecting. and getting the right people connected and motivated and kind of sharing this vision. And I guess even I want you to think about this as I'm talking. I want to rebrand what you're doing, the SAT talks. I think what we really want are the SAT walks. We want to really accomplish something, and I think that's what's exciting to the academic community, is academics a lot of times are great researchers, they do great things, but they really aren't focused, they don't know where the problem is. And so if we can appropriately focus them on the problem and they can bring their assets to the table, we can achieve great things. And that's what we did. So the co-op brought in UMKC, Tony Lupino brought me in. We sat on Valentine's Day, we sat at around 4 tables, talked about the 4 initiatives they had going, went back and did some thinking back at UMKC, met with Leo Morton, our chancellor, and talked this over and really saw is this kind of envelope. The co-op over here on the left is bringing resources and heart to the table. The UMKC is bringing part of the head, but we all are thinkers. And really the coalescing force is the neighborhoods that we're trying to help. And this really becomes scalable because it doesn't matter if it's here in Kansas City, if it's Wendell Phillips or it's Hickman Mills, or it's Kansas City or Cleveland or Cincinnati or Pittsburgh or other cities, or if it's the US or it's in Haiti. We're facing these issues on a global basis. So what we're doing here is trying to lay out a model that can pull us together. And the first thing we did is we looked at ourselves at UMKC and said, what assets do we bring to the table? And then secondly, how do we align them with the co-op vision to have this collective impact, the triple bottom line, which is that win-win situation. And we brought in the law school and the business school and public affairs for the housing initiative. We brought in the Department of Economics for economic development and entrepreneurship. Doing what they're doing in Haiti is creating jobs, organically growing the solution. And that's, again, why the neighborhood is down here. We can't push our solutions on them. They have to look at an array of offerings and pick the appropriate ones, the assets that match their needs. And it's really community-based. That's where the customization comes in. We also work with education. We're involvement in education is doing a lot of things. And same thing with health and wellness. We've got people in from our med school, from psychology. Because this is not build it and they will come. You cannot force solutions. It's really understanding the holistic approach that's necessary to affect positive transformation that's sustainable. And so it's getting people with the services and helping build the confidence that the medical services they get are appropriate services that they can trust and they can go to. And so it's the whole thing all comes together and coalesces. So what we did is, and this is a process that we've used, the church used, Kathy used, as she was talking about, problem statement, the catalyst. There's an issue. And not many academics are really dealing with these issues in a holistic sense. And the issue to us is interdisciplinary. So we come up with a problem statement. We did our sort of asset mapping in the middle, looking at the neighborhood and where it is in the life cycle. Little theory comes in here so we can affect change. And then finally, the walking, the action comes in, aligning the resources and initiating something to act. It's an action-oriented program, which is what's exciting to academics, to really be able to make a difference. A little theory comes in here. When you look at cities, they grow over time, like a life cycle we all go through, product life cycles, growth and maturity, et cetera. But then we enter into this stage here where things either they're prolonged or they go into declining stage. And there are different levels of decline in the 2 neighborhoods I mentioned and in the cities we talked about across the country and in Haiti. Some are in much more desperate positions than others, and they have different needs. So what we want to do is create a customized solution that really affects positive change that turns things around. And it's about data. That's where the data comes in, the big data stuff. But it's also about talking and the surveys that we did in Haiti, et cetera. That's really important because we need to understand from the people who live there what their needs are so we can appropriately align solutions. And hopefully what we are is expert resources. What do you have available? What do I need? And we can work together to affect that matching. And so that's what it's all about. So it's collaboration. It's customization, not one size fits all. And it's also then about what? It's about leadership, collective impact, where we share the joint alignment. And really what it is the neighborhood then is picking into the resources. And that's what UMKC is excited about, is being able to match the talent that we have with the resources that the co-op has, that the needs that the community has, so that can really affect this partnership that works. So maybe it's the church, the market, the academy, and the community games. And if you think about it, we just really define the field. It's all scalable, and it depends on what level of aggregation we want to attack this global problem. And that's why we're excited to be here. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you, Jim. And so you can get a little sense of why we're excited to be working with UMKC on this. There's things that they do that we could never dream of doing in this whole process. And part of what I want us to see and understand, going back to my conversations earlier, is that we need one is we need a seat at the tables, at the right tables. But the other thing is that we need to be in such a way that we can bring partners on to do things that we are not necessarily good at, nor should we feel the need to become good at those kinds of things. So I started out by saying this is about from the idea of cooperation to collaboration, and that it takes more than vision and values and the courage to act. I cannot think of an institution, an organization that has had more vision and value over the centuries and the courage to act than the church. But yet I'm saying to you that that's not enough. And I think this is the point at which the church has to wrestle with as it's going forward. I don't know about you, but I love that old film, If You Build It, They Will Come. And one of the things that I have discovered in the last, that has been surprising to me over the last 8 years in the work that we've done with the co-op, is that there is a truth that if the church will slow down, if the church will step up, if the church will think beyond some of the easy kinds of things that we've said in the past, one of which is KISS, keep it simple, silly, stupid, whatever it is, that's killing us, folks. All of the easy stuff has been done. Can we just admit that? All of the low-hanging fruit has been picked. The simple stuff is done. If we want to be relevant in the work that needs to be done moving forward, we've got to be willing to step into the complex and the complicated. And we've got to be able to build partnerships with those who can handle complexity and complication, because it's no longer simple. And one of the things that I've come to understand is that if we will build the structure and the strategy, it's not a lack of vision, it's not a lack of values, and it's not a lack of action. We have that. But what the church languishes in is our inability to build the kind of structures and strategies that can bear the weight of this kind of deep and dense collaboration. The Protestant Reformation, of which I'm a part of, has kind of gone haywire to the extent that we all want to do our own thing. We all want to gather around us just enough to be able to do something Herculean and or heroic. But that's not what changes things in the end. Our ability, I believe, to create structures and strategies through which this thing called the church can work together in collaboration as a noun versus an adjective, I think is what it will take to be able to pull in the kinds of partners that we're finding with UMKC and others. And I believe the things that we're learning here with the co-op are things that can happen. Obviously in this city we're excited about where we're at, but I think they can happen in other places around the country as well. So thank you very much.